so I want to tell you about these two guys that you're going to be working with because we want to offer you the job. I said, what do you mean? He said, they're just different. I said, they are? He goes, yeah, they're different. And I was like, what do you mean? They seem nice to me. He goes, by the way, all the signs were there. All the subliminals are like, honey, gird your loins. Put on your seatbelt. It's about to be a ride.
Christensen, the founder and CEO of Argent, a women's workwear brand. And this is Work Friends, a podcast for those who take their work, but not always themselves, seriously.
Work Friends.
I can't wait for you to meet our next guest, who is always a good time, Cari Champion. Cari is a sports journalist with over 25 years of experience reporting on the biggest stories and most formidable athletes of our time. She's a regular contributor on CNN and host of the Naked Sports with Cari Champion podcast. An LA native, Cari started her career at the Tennis Channel, covering icons like Serena and Venus Williams before joining ESPN for a number of years, hosting and reporting on shows including First Take and Sports Nation. Alongside Jemele Hill, Cari also co-hosted the Vice show Cari and Jemele Stick to Sports. Cari's work squarely sits at the intersection of sports, politics, and culture, as she's been a leading voice who not only reports on what's happening in the biggest arenas in the world, but what it means for society at large. She's a force and a joy, and I'm so excited she's here today. Now on Work Friends, Cari Champion. Cari and I just dive right in. Cari.
Yes, please, I'm ready.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is an honor. I have been on many a podcast, and this is an honor. When you first started this podcast, I was watching and I documented it, and I was like, okay, fine. Maybe one day it'll be me. And looky here.
Are you too kind? Are you kidding?
I'm serious.
I also love everything that you do, and I'm excited to get into it.
Me too.
But first, we're going to start by talking about Luka's LA debut, because I know you're a Lakers fan, and last night was his first game. Congratulations on that trade.
I want to thank the basketball gods. I want to first start by thanking the people who want us to win something soon. I just don't know how to control my emotions.
How lucky. I mean, he is so lovable. This trade makes no sense.
Something is going on there, and we will find out about it in a 30 for 30. We'll find about it in a docuseries later. LeBron still contends he had no idea. Most people say that Danny Ainge, who was a part of the third party trade with the Boston Celtics, who hates the Lakers, would not have helped. He said he had no idea. And then I'm watching the press conference, and Jason Kidd, his former coach, looks like a prisoner. I was like, what is going on here?
I'm only served on Instagram now NBA content.
That's all you care about.
It's all. I texted you about this, but I've been obsessed. I love Luka. I think this is great for him.
I think it's great for him.
And he has handled it so beautifully.
A professional.
Such a professional. He had a press release yesterday about donating money to LA for the fires.
Oh, wow.
It was beautifully written. I just feel like he is like masterclass.
Well, he also knows he is going to be the face of the franchise. And what I think is really, if everything goes well and, according to plan, but what I think is really, really beautiful about all of this is because there's a bigger story. No one's safe. No one is safe.
Yes.
If they're trading a 25-year-old at the prime of his career, and they give him to one of the biggest storied franchises in the history of, basketball, because normally people don't help the Lakers because the Lakers consistently reload and reload. We got LeBron in free agency. We had Kobe homegrown, but we get these really big superstars, Shaq in free agency. And for them to give us Luka, I was like, well, thank you, basketball gods, once again. And so
give is the right word, too.
Gave them away. For free.
I could talk about this for our entire podcast.
But this isn't about what our podcast is
our
about.
Podcast
it's not about basketball.
I'm going to just bring it back to basketball over and over again because sports are my happy place. I want to start with an icebreaker, even though that could have been our icebreaker. I want to hear about your biggest oh no moment this week.
Boy, I've had a lot of those. This is apropos that we're doing this podcast. I am currently, I have a podcast myself, Naked Sports, where I talk about sports and culture and politics, how they all intersect. The Super Bowl, most recent one, Super Bowl 59, perfect example of how these worlds intersect. But my day job, if you will, is an analyst / contributor on CNN. And one of my oh no moments I pride myself on trying to keep my composure. And last panel that I served on, the last panel that I was on, I lost my composure, and I didn't realize in the moment that I was doing it, but after it was said and done, I was like, if I'm ever going to win the war on false propaganda and trying to connect with people's hearts and souls, I can't be so emotional at all times. Passion is very purposeful, but how you present it, especially in polarizing times such as these, is imperative. And my oh no moment was, and I talk with my hands, as you can see, I'm holding them really tight right now. I can't help it. I grew up talking with my hands, and I'm talking with my hands, and I'm making points, and I'm doing this. And if you watch without the sound on, you're like, something's upsetting this young lady, and she's very angry. And is she going to hurt someone with these hands? The hands are here and here. And I'm like, oh no, Cari, gather. I pride myself on being composed. I was baptized through fire. I worked at ESPN with Stephen A. and Skip Bayless on the First Take show. And that was uncomfortable television at its height.
It's funny that you highlight this because I actually know you to be unflappable. Like, you were put in these hot seats. I mean, Abby Phillips' show on CNN, which I think is what you're referencing.
Yes, correct.
That is a wild environment to be in.
Wild environment.
And I feel like we as women, you as a Black woman, you have to hold your composure even more. And
I don't get the benefit of the doubt.
Yes, and these unhinged white men that are just buying into every conspiracy ever. It's just there's so many double standards and there's so much hypocrisy, but you are excellent in these environments. So it's funny to hear you say that
I could be better. I could be better. I'm hard on myself. I know you know what it's like to really want to nail it and be excellent at every single turn. And so I did feel a little reprieve because as of late, I've been listening to a lot of people in the world that I live in and say, it's okay to show some emotion.
Yes.
It's okay to care. It's okay to get a little flustered because it is extreme. It requires so much emotional intelligence not to lose your cool, and it also requires you to be mature. And my friends have said to me, I'm not mature enough to have that conversation, because these are personal things that mean a lot to you.
I think that's what's really hard about current environment too, is it is personal. There are implications for people and causes that we care so deeply about, and you are representing so much more than yourself.
Right.
And so I think it's okay. I think you're distinguishing between passion and, losing control of your emotions is probably right, but I think it is great to be passionate and it's necessary. I think it's okay to even dip your toe into emotional.
I think so too.
At this stage.
I think so too.
Fun fact about that night, did y'all realize you were all in Argent? You, Abby, and Ashley Allison? Ashley Allison, right?
Yeah, it is.
We clocked that and we're very excited to
how
see
funny.
that.
That is so funny. We were.
I want to go back to your childhood.
Yeah.
Lakers fan because you're born and raised in LA?
Yes, born and raised in LA. I grew up in West LA until I was about 13 years old, and my mother moved to Pasadena because she loved it there. And so living in Pasadena pretty much changed my trajectory, I think, my life trajectory. I think moving into a smaller community, different school environment really gave me a sense of focus, and it also allowed me to be, to stand out a little more and realize that I had certain special gifts that needed to be nurtured, and that environment helped me do that. So, diehard Laker fan. My mother, believe it or not, is not a Laker fan. My grandmother is a Laker fan.
What's mom?
She's not even in. She's like, yeah, maybe. I like Jordan, and then every now and again,
cute.
Yeah, right. And then every now and again when the Lakers do something she's like, I like the Lakers, remember? And I'm like, you don't like the Lakers, but that's fine. You can get a part of join the bandwagon. But my grandmother played basketball in the segregated South in high school.
Where?
Magnolia, Arkansas.
Oh, wow.
My grandmother's 91 years old. She just had a birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Grandma.
Still alive, still loves her Lakers, still watches them religiously. She could tell me more about the Lakers than I can tell you about the Lakers right now. And when I was a kid, very few people would go with her to watch the Laker games because she doesn't drive. And in California, that is a no-no. So she would take the bus, and she was always babysitting me, and I would just hop on the bus with her. So we'd take the bus to what was then the Forum, and we would watch the Laker games and sit in the nosebleed. We would go to the Coliseum to watch the Clippers because those were especially the tickets we could afford. And she would just explain the game to me. And believe it or not, that she just planted a seed that I did not know would flourish this way.
I was going to ask about what your early inspirations of work and models of work were. Are you thinking about career in any capacity at this stage?
When we started going to the games, I was probably 7 or 8, I knew that I wanted to do something that was forward facing. Well, one, I was an only child, so I had a lot of attention and energy, and I played by myself a lot. So I always felt like I could do whatever. But I wasn't thinking sports. I was thinking I was going to be like this lady on TV. I don't know if you've heard of her, Oprah.
I knew you were going to say that.
There was this woman. Something about this woman. She was very fascinating. And I remember watching her the very first time. To this day, I've even shared the story with Oprah. I remember watching TV, walking past the television. My mother would always be watching news. This is the funniest story. And I'm like, why are you always watching news? It's so boring. News is so boring. Then during a commercial break, there was now that I know, it was a tease, if you will. This new show's coming out. And then I would watch this woman. I would just walk past the television, and I would just stop and look at her. And I was always just fascinated by someone who was my complexion, who seemed so regal, words that I didn't know then, but that's what captivated me. And I would just look. I'm like, I want to do that. Whatever that is cool.
Yeah.
And that was the seed. That seed was planted, but I also at the same time was being nurtured by going to these basketball games. It's such a wild, wild story how life really presents itself, even though it was already meant to be. You know what I mean?
So incredible.
So fascinating.
Yeah, my dream job when I was 7, 8 was to be a towel boy.
Oh!
For those games. It's like all I wanted. And not towel girl because it was always boys, but that was like my dream job.
Correct. It was always boys. Correct. Yeah.
And then I used to record on VHS tapes Oprah.
Oh.
And watch Oprah back.
Oh.
Over and over again.
And look at you now.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You're almost. We're doing the same thing in a different vision, in a different way.
This is certainly not the box that I fall into at all. I've very reluctantly been drawn out of the shadows into.
Yep. And I think it's perfect.
Facing.
I think it's
Cari.
perfect. I think it's perfect and necessary.
Thank you. Yeah, I will say for anyone starting a business, I think this is a tension that exists. Is like people want the authenticity that comes along with knowing the founder.
Yeah.
This is also that influencer economy. People really want to see everything.
Sure.
I'm reluctant to share anything,
Same.
but I'm comfortable to step out in front of a camera when it's talking about work or when it's highlighting incredible women and telling these stories.
Same.
And we're having these conversations. I mean, really the impetus for starting the podcast is that there's so much value in the little like girl that you're talking about who looked up to Oprah that's now looking up to Cari Champion hearing like a very raw, honest conversation that you two also mess up still, and we're all like figuring it out still.
So
that's really our goal is like, how do we inspire that next generation, offer representation?
to me, I think that's my purpose.
Yeah.
It's holding the door open.
I mean,
that's the only thing that I'm really put on this earth for. And I think oftentimes I forget it and I lose my way. But when I'm like, that's why I'm here. This is the most gratifying.
Let's take this as an opportunity to talk about Brown Girls Dream, your nonprofit.
Yes, please.
Yeah, because I mean, that I think is like walking the walk with exactly what you just said, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. When I first started in this business, I would go up to women that I would see like at church or I would see anywhere, and I'd say, "Do you mind, helping me? Can you?" I was that kid. I remember walking up to Sean Robinson, who was the only woman I would see who filled the representation slot for me for entertainment at what we call NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, and she was so kind to me and so generous. A local newswoman by the name of Pat Harvey would let me come and sit with her when I was in high school. And I remember seeing Pat Harvey on a plane when I was coming back from Super Bowl when I was at ESPN. I said, "Miss Harvey, I don't know if you remember me."
Oh.
And she was coming back from Super Bowl. And she said, "Tell me." And I was just like, "You don't remember." This is when she worked at a Channel 9 in Los Angeles. And I said, "And you let me come and sit with you and you would talk to me." And she said, "Well, where did we meet?" I said, "I worked the front desk at a day spa and you would come in for massages and you were just so kind." And you were like, "Sure, come on." And so all of those little moments, they were simple. Or I was like, that was just rewarding because it was hard to find. And then that's why I created Brown Girls Dream. And look, I don't get it right. I don't always get it right. I'm so intense about my girls. I treat them like they're my children, but I also want them to be perfect because I know the world is so hard. And in the process of figuring out how to do a foundation and mentor young ladies, I have to understand there's going to be this push and pull. I have to let them go and make their decisions. They can ask me till I'm blue in the face, right? They all ask me 4 or 5 times, and I'll give them the same advice and they'll do the exact opposite. And then years later they'll come back and be like, so, and I'm like, okay, don't be frustrated. Let them live their life, right?
Yeah.
That's a part of what the story is.
Yes. Yeah, and how do people support, get involved?
So Brown Girls Dream nonprofit, we are a sponsored 501(c)(3). So we have a website where you can go and donate. But what I usually ask for people to do is I like to do work in kind, meaning if there is an event and they want us to show up and talk about what we do or what the women do with their individual careers, say for instance with your company, if you had a bring your kid to work day, I would like to bring some of my girls to Argent to see how you created this. I want them to see what you do to make it happen, because I often find that young women don't realize that there are careers that they could have, or they don't understand that there's a world that exists beyond sitting in front of the camera. I'm not saying I don't love what I do, but if I would have known the world had different opportunities, I could have specialized in coding or in marketing, or one time we took a trip to see one of our mentors used to be an attorney for the San Francisco 49ers, and she brought us all into this, the facility, and the women walked around, and my mentee saw that there were jobs that they just didn't know existed. You mean to tell me that I could be an attorney that runs everything for an entire football franchise? I didn't even know that existed.
I talk about this too. I grew up in South Carolina. There's not a lot of industry. I basically grew up seeing that I could be a banker, a lawyer, or a doctor, but really a mom. Mm-hmm. Like, it felt like those were the options.
Oh.
Had I known that I could have worked at Nike or wherever, I don't think Argent ever would have existed, but I just didn't have a lot of models of what work could be. And so the reason I really wanted to start this is, and I touched on this earlier, but it's to offer representation.
That's right.
If you see it, you can believe it and be it, and the world can imagine it. So I want to hear about how you, like, where did you get started? You went to UCLA. What did you study? Communications?
I majored in American literature, English more specifically, and I had a minor in communications because we don't really have a communications department. At the time, we didn't. The reason why I did English was because a local news anchor came and spoke to my Comms 10 class and said, look, you can do whatever you want. He was like, English means you can write, and no one can ever take that from you, but you can also be a doctor. You can also go to law school with that. You can also go to med school with an English major. English major is, it's a toolkit, if you will. It'll let you do all the things. And I said, okay, I'll major in English. It just made sense to me. I had no idea, because I was the first in my family to go to college. And by family, I mean my mother didn't go to college. She took, a couple of classes at a junior college. My grandmother went to trade school, because there was no way she was attending college back in her day. And I remember thinking, wow, this is so amazing. I'm an English major. I cannot believe that. And it was the hardest thing that I have ever done, probably till this day.
That is an impossible major.
It is.
I'm sorry.
You're writing 20-page papers every other day. I'm like, what did I decide to do? But it really, really taught me a lot. It formulated a discipline that I still have to this day.
I do think you also touched on what happens. We go to college and make these big life choices too soon.
We have no idea what we're doing. No idea.
Right. And one person can say, you should do this. And you go, like, oh, okay.
I will. And and I love you for saying that, because oftentimes I would say, I wish, or not even that I wish, I just didn't have enough resources around me, but I actually did have enough resources around me. If I, but you're just so young, you're not able to put them together.
No way.
There's just no way,
No, there's no way to know. I ended up choosing business administration, very generic, choice, but I really, it also ties back to what I was dreaming as a career. I just wasn't envisioning, even going to school, I wasn't, I think for both of us, probably for you, I'm going to be the first person in my family to go to school. What a privilege. And I think as women growing up, we internalize a lot of the messaging that's thrown our way. And so it's I'll just be happy to be in any school. Anybody that'll have me.
Yeah, who will have me. I knew that I was going to do this. I knew that. When I would tell my friends.
Like what you're doing now, you mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I knew I was going to be in front of the camera. I wanted to be an attorney or this, but I wasn't as passionate about being an attorney because I didn't want to continue to go to school anymore, if I'm being honest.
I
would be. I know. And I've even thought now, I was like, that might be another career for me eventually. I might, just because I want to. But I remember thinking it was really important for me to speak for those who can speak for themselves. I mean, the feeling that's in my spirit has never changed. Like it has always been, how do I speak for those who can speak for themselves? Oftentimes, I wish I didn't have that. I really do. It is a blessing, but it is also such a burden at the same time, because you find yourself enraged or, trying to control your emotions or feeling like you have to fight for every person. And I can't take that. I can't remove that from my spirit.
It's a lot of pressure. Yeah. And then questioning probably whether you got it right or not, and whether you did right by them.
Correct.
I imagine.
Correct.
Okay. So go into day spa. How do you get your foot in the door?
I'm working at this day spa for about a year and a half because I had to, work. I had 5 or 10 jobs in college. I mean, at one time I'd have 4. Nothing's changed. I'd have 4 or 5 jobs at a time.
Are you paying your way through college?
Yes,
too?
of course. Yes,
Yeah.
I had so many loans because they make you pay your loans 6 months after you graduate. How ridiculous is that?
Ridiculous.
How ridiculous is that? You're making a 21-year-old pay off like $60,000 in loans. They have no concept how to do that.
No, and
for me anyway.
Well, no, you're assuming this like burden of debt that you really don't know what you're signing up for, and you kind of have to. Like
you have to. And then I have credit cards. I don't know how credit cards, because financial literacy was not something I learned. I'm like, I'm in so much debt. I remember calling my mom being like, I'm in so much debt. I have this credit card. She's like, well, how much debt? I was like, it's $2,000. And she laughed out loud. She laughed out loud. I was like, it's $2,000. And she was like, oh, honey. Right, you see how you are?
Yes. Yes, it's so endearing.
And so I had this job, and then finally I saved enough money to get a resume tape together. Because I didn't have, as I mentioned at UCLA, there wasn't a department where you can record a resume reel where you could pretend to be a reporter. And I saved enough money to put a resume reel together, but I took a part-time job as an assignment editor at a local news station where you would sit at the desk and you would news gather. Arguably the most important job, but they let a 21-year-old do it. I think something's wrong with the newsroom.
How did you get the job?
I just applied. I said, hey, I just graduated from UCLA. I want to be a reporter.
I'll work for nothing?
And no, it was basically nothing.
Yeah.
They were like, well, you can work weekend nights listening to scanners and dispatching our reporters. It was such a huge responsibility. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, sure, sounds good to me. And I remember at night, here I am, 21 years old, working with another young lady who wanted to be a reporter. We had no idea what we were doing. And there was a folder that would be given to us of local news stories that we could cover. And then you were also supposed to listen to the scanners to see if there was like a 187, a murder, or you would learn what the codes were. It was just such a huge responsibility, but they gave this position to people who were just starting out because no one wants to work the assignment desk. It's just such a thankless position. And I worked and figured out while working the assignment desk what was considered news, what was worthy of local news. I was news gathering and I didn't even know it. But what it taught me was to be able to identify what might be interesting depending on the market that you lived in. And I put this reel together. I'd follow different reporters around and I'd say, can I try when you're done? Can I get in front of the camera? And they'd be like, sure. So thank you to all those reporters I harassed.
I roll, sure.
Yeah, sure. They're like, sure, get in here. Fine. Don't bother me, kiddo. Literally. I mean, because it's a tough business.
That's what it takes, though. I mean, I feel like hustle in this industry is so necessary.
You can't do it any other way.
Yes.
And that's when people are like, you're so tough. I'm like, I'm learning. I'm a chip off the old block. You learn to navigate this world that way. And then I put a resume reel together, and I had 10 resume reels. I only could afford 10. And I sent the very last one out to West Virginia, and I got the job. And they said, do you want to start next week? And I was like, well, I'm in California. And I said, well, what's the move package? Well, we don't have a move package, but we can. It was like something like $300. So I packed up my Nissan Altima and traveled across country and started my job as a one-man band. And that's how I got in the business, y'all.
I recently read Katie Couric's book. Very similar. It's like you find whoever will take you.
Anybody.
And then you have to put in the time. It's all about experience.
That's it.
Yeah, and just being in frroont of camera, learning what works, what doesn't work.
And by the way, she was also someone I wanted to be when I first started.
Oh, yeah.
I cut my hair short like hers. I wore blazers. I stood in front of the camera. I was going to be Katie Couric, y'all. Nobody was going to tell me what I could not do. Katie Couric was going to be my local news hero. Oprah ultimately the vision, but that was a talk show. But when you talk about news, Katie Couric all the way.
Yeah, yeah.
All the way.
And I love her. Like, she's transformed, into now what she's like, started her own company, Katie Couric Media. She's
smart.
She's unstoppable.
Unstoppable.
But she started the exact same way. And I think this is like an important learning for the current generation that's coming up.
Yeah.
They have like an unprecedented amount of pressure.
Yeah.
To have the perfect resume,
Sure.
to have, everything figured out by the age of 21. And also, I think have like skipped over the jobs that you're talking about, waiting tables, working retail, learning people.
Yep. They've skipped over all of that.
And I would argue that those are still very
Important.
necessary stepping stones. And I want to see that more than internship at tier 1 company, blue chip company.
I think what I learned was work ethic. I think people think it's about posting pictures and yes, working hard, and they all do. But there's a different type of work ethic that comes with, being a host or working at a day spa, working at the front desk, or trying to interact with people on different levels from all over the world. It's so important. And I think that taught me just a lot about, myself.
The people aspect of work, I would say, is the most important part.
The only part, to connect, to do this, which is why I think I'm awful at small talk. I think I'm horrid at small talk, which is why I think you and I connected right away.
Oh, that's really funny. Yeah, I really dislike small talk.
Oh, I won't do it.
And I'm Southern, and so that goes against, how we're raised, I guess. I can do it, but I just want to get into the meat. Like, I just want to go.
We all can do it, but the older I get, the less patience I have with it. And I'll do it, but I won't feel, my soul won't feel fulfilled.
Yes,
Yeah.
It doesn't fill my bucket.
Yeah,
I
correct.
feel the same way. Spring means one thing. It's time to say yes. Yes to outings, yes to RSVPs, and yes to spontaneous opportunities. Argent Spring Summer 2025 collection is prepared to equip you for it all. The season's newest arrivals are ready for anything, with a collection of suiting and separates that are as versatile as you are. Explore captivating colors like orchid and lapis, and chic new neutrals in smoke and fern. Plus, shop incredibly lightweight linen styles that keep you looking and feeling effortlessly cool no matter what the season has in store. Explore all the latest spring arrivals at argentwork.com or come visit us in stores in New York City and in Washington, D.C. Happy shopping. So eventually you work your way to the Tennis Channel. That's your first big break, right? Is that from West Virginia?
No.
Oh,
I do
okay.
a bunch of small markets, and then I do one kind of big market. Remember, we didn't. The most important thing is I got fired. Remember, in Atlanta, I didn't tell you that story.
No.
So,
wait, I do know this story.
You do
yes,
know the story.
Please share this story.
Yeah. So I was a local news reporter, and you bounce around from market to market until you work your way to whatever the top market is. My goal at the time, always my career goal, was to make my way to be a local news reporter / anchor in Los Angeles, or a Lakers reporter. Those were all the goals, right? Those were my tiny little goals. And I got a job in Atlanta. I was a weekend anchor, weekend reporter, very apropos for where we are right now today. And I was covering a really big story. And then the day that the story it finally broke, I had been covering for months, and my news director took the story away from me and gave it to someone else. And I remember being so brokenhearted, and she was like, "It's not my fault. He wants," and it was a skin thing. It was, I had worked on it and gave it to his favorite blonde, and I was livid. And I never had that happen to me. That was my first interaction with feeling marginalized as an adult. I've never had that feeling ever before. I worked in Florida before that. And so I didn't handle it well, and the boss did not like the way that I responded to him. Another big mistake, respect your boss at all time. And
is that the takeaway, Ben?
no, it wasn't, but the takeaway for me was to control your emotion.
Yeah.
Because I could be angry, but I didn't handle him well in how he treated me, and it was very punitive how he treated me, and I could have handled it better, but it was my first experience, obviously, in that way. And then an opportunity arose for him to say I did something wrong in the newsroom, which was curse on air, which is so silly now. Like, can you imagine?
Oh, God.
People curse on TV every day. Can you imagine the words that come out of people? And so, so funny thinking about it.
I
And
wish
so,
we still lived in
I
that
wish
world.
we lived in that world where you couldn't curse on TV. And so they let me go, but then my agent worked some magic and was like, "You really don't have any proof that she cursed on television." The local community in Atlanta stood up for me, power of community and connecting with
How
people.
long had you been there?
I had been there only less than 2 years, but I had really made an impact in the community, and they stood up for me, and then they gave me my job back under the condition that I would leave when my contract was up. And so my contract was going to be up in like 6 or 7 months. So my contract was up, and then I had to find a job, and I was without a job for like a year and change. It was really hard,
Roughly
really
what
difficult.
age?
I was probably 30.
Okay.
And I remember just not having any money, being really like feeling like, this is it. My career is over. I'm done in this business. I'm never going to be able to bounce back. And I got a job at the Tennis Channel, which was part-time. I knew nothing about tennis. They brought me in to read the prompter, and the names on the prompter are wrapped. And if you know the prompter, right? I was like, what is this? What do you want me to do with this name, sir? Literally, it was an audition. And they were like, okay, we like your name. This is how they hired me. We love your last name, Champion. That'd be great on air.
Stop.
Yeah, and I was like, I could hear them saying this, and I was like, this is wild. And then I was just like, whatever. And so I did the audition, and I would stop down every 5 seconds and say, how do you pronounce, and because tennis is an international sport. And they were like, it's Anna Kuznetsova. What? Kuznetsova? Who? Now, what? Huh? And then it was Gael Monfils at the time. All the people who were really doing well. Anna Kournikova. Those kinds of names. You're just learning them, and you don't use them all the time. But they're easy names now for me to say. Or Martina Navratilova. I was really, really blown away that I knew none of these things, and I became such a student of tennis. But they liked something about me and hired me, and they kept me there for years. And one day I just happened to look over while I was at the US Open, and I see ESPN next to our booth, and I was like, I should probably go work there. I was just like, it just makes sense. Because
where is the Tennis Channel?
The Tennis Channel was based in LA, but we would travel all over. They cover... That was my first time going to the French Open, the U.S. Open, Wimbledon, Australian Open. I mean, that job really opened my eyes. It was always a part-time job because they don't have full-time programming, but it really opened my eyes to a world that I just did not know exists to me at such a late stage in life. And I finally started to travel in my 30s, and I was like, wow, this is where I want to be. I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to travel. I want to meet different people. And I didn't understand the power of sports, but I did understand the power of connection and how athletes more than others can really get a heart. They get treated so poorly sometimes. It's a fair weather business for them. You are loved or hated, right? Depending on where you are in your career. And then I also realized just the impact that they had on the people around them, the fans, and how they could influence. And I took that very seriously, and I was like, I want to do this at a different level. I had no idea I would be hosting a show called First Take when I finally got a job at ESPN. I would watch First Take. No lie. I would watch First Take, and I would turn it down because it was so loud. I was like, what the hell is this?
Was it Stephen A. Smith?
Yes, it was. Of course it was. And they'd be yelling, and I was like,
I just saw he was in the game this past week, and I talked to him like I knew him. I go, oh, hey, how are you?
He's like, hey, how you doing?
He wasn't very excited to see me. Of course.
Oh, my God, no. Welcome. Imagine working with that. And so, my goodness, and being a rookie at that. And when they called and they asked me to do the job, I was like, yeah, of course, I'll take it. But in my mind, I'm like, wow, am I really about to sit next to all this yelling?
Wait. Tennis Channel. I do want to ask a question. Where is this on Serena and Venus's journey?
Oh, they are still very much playing. They're still very much at the top of their game. Serena, I remember when like I said, I worked a lot of local news jobs, one of which was in West Palm Beach. And I would see Serena and Venus all the time. I would cover them for local news stories. And they were very above it all, like meaning I don't even know they knew I existed. They were so intimidating to interview. Serena, and they just didn't speak. Serena is not shy. She's just like, nope. Mm-hmm. And Venus was like, on camera, Venus is like, but off camera, she's like, uh-huh. And and it's not that they're mean. They just don't have the time. They're in their world. And I thank God Mel Robbins talked to them about let them. And I was like, I let them. Like, I didn't take it personal. I was like, that's who they are. Mm-hmm. It's hard to break through. They traveled with their family. But when you had to interview them, I mean, I was so nervous. I was like, always like, oh my God, even to this day. But the relationship after 88 years has softened.
You see that in some athletes. Russell Westbrook comes to mind for me because I've seen him
grow.
Well, I've seen how protective he is of like he personally in their contracts, like forced to have these conversations and forced to do these interviews. But he is beloved. I've seen him in the LA airport because he's from LA and how kind he is to every employee.
He's so kind.
And he doesn't have that reputation. He's so kind.
Well, he doesn't, many of them don't like the media, understandably. But what that really is, if we're honest, is it's hard to trust the media. And it's also something where a lot of these athletes have to be they're very sensitive. They're very sensitive. Every single person that I've interviewed that's a superstar or not, they're very aware of what has been written about them or said about them. And they want to protect their peace. When you talk about him in the airport, I think about his wife. His wife is a therapist, and she is just a powerhouse. I liken her, and I remember hosting an event with her recently. I was like, you are very Michelle Obama. You're very regal and kind and warm.
One of my favorite relationships, I think, in the NBA, Nina Westbrook.
Yeah. I feel so safe around her. And that is, I said, that's a special ability that you have. And for him to be married to that type of woman tells me everything about him.
Yes, I agree with that. So how did you get your foot in the door then at ESPN?
I remember.
You put yourself out there, it sounds like.
I had a resume reel, and I sent, I don't know where I met I don't know where I met him at, but I sent to one at the time, he's not there anymore, he was hiring, and I sent him my resume reel, and he called me on the phone, and I said, I'm going to fly out there. He said, and he was one of these guys where he's like, yeah, come on and do it. Fly, yeah. But he was like a rah-rah cheerleader, yeah. But I don't think he ever thought that I would do it. And then one day I called, and I said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to be in the neighborhood, and I would love to sit with you. I wasn't going to be in the neighborhood. I bought a plane ticket and flew to Connecticut. I wasn't going to be in the neighborhood. I sat in the lobby for hours and waited for him to come and meet me. So I'm sitting in the lobby.
I'm sorry, the number of times I've done this. I'm going to be in Portland, Oregon tomorrow.
You told me that.
All the time. I do it all the time.
When you're fundraising, you're like, I'll be there tomorrow. Yeah. Really? Well, come by. No, I won't. I won't be there at all. You said yes.
You are the trip.
Yeah.
Why are you in town?
No real reason but to see you. That's all. And I sat in that lobby, and he came, and we chatted, and he was like, okay, now, talked to me for a half hour. He's like, okay, then. Nice chatting with you. Now where do you live again? I was like, Los Angeles. He was like, you came here from Los Angeles? And then he felt immediately pressured or obligated or I should do this for her. And he introduced me to so many different people. And he said, we'll keep you in mind. And every for a year, I would send him my resume reel from the Tennis Channel. I just updated and send it to him, updated and send it to him, updated. And one day he called and he said, they're looking for a host of this one show called First Take. And in my mind, I was like, the show I turn down every morning because it's so loud. Because, I would be watching ESPN, and then when that would come on, I'm like, I cannot.
Hot takes, just hot takes.
I was like, I cannot.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and I was immediately intimidated. And I was like, well, what happened to Jay? Jay Crawford at the time was hosting. He's like, oh, Jay's just going to go and do SportsCenter. He said, I was like, okay, I don't know the politics. And I go and I do the audition, and I kill it. Like I'm not gonna lie to you.
You're made for it.
They did this thing where they would put the story in the prompter, totally different prompter story from Tennis Channel. And as I was reading, they turned the prompter off to see if I knew what the story was. So I'm reading the story and I'm getting ready to tease it up, and they just turn it off, and I just keep reading, and I just, kind of tee up the questions to the guys. And I was like, funny, because that happens. Your prompter does go out, or the story gets messed up, or they'd read a story and it wasn't the right story. The story didn't match with the video that I was talking about, and they want me to ad-lib and, recalibrate. And I was fine with it. And then I remember turning to Skip, and I was like, so Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith were going to be the new host of the new version of First Take. This was 2012. And they needed someone to be their moderator. And they would refer to it, especially in the blogs or in the papers, as a referee, if you will, which is exactly what I was, but not really. And I turned to Skip, and I had to chat with both of them after it was said and done. I was like, Skip, I think I did great. What do you think? He was like, that's not real. He was like, that's not what it's like. He was like, yeah, you did fine, but you can't really do this job unless you do the job. So, that's just fake. He was like, we're tired. We really weren't doing our thing. But, you did good. Thanks, I think.
That's the first time you met him?
Yep.
And then when do you find out that this is going to be your job?
I get the job. I go to the U.S. Open with Tennis Channel, and Jamie Horowitz at the time was in charge of the show. And I said to myself, if they don't call me by the time I go to the U.S. Open, I didn't get the job. And he called me the day before. He said, hey, I'm going to be at the U.S. Open. Is there a way we can meet on Saturday in our suite? And he met me, and he wanted to meet me in person, and he talked to me, and he goes, so I want to tell you about these two guys that you're going to be working with because we want to offer you the job. I said, what do you mean? He said, they're just different. I said, they are? He goes, yeah, they're different. And I was like, what do you mean? They seem nice to me. He goes, By the way, all the signs were there. All the subliminals are like, honey, gird your loins, put on your seatbelt. It's about to be a ride.
Red flag.
And just like all relationships, I ignored it. And so I go, and I had my first week. And when I tell you I was baptized by fire, I was like, oh, this is a real thing. And I remember before I started the job, Stephen A. called me, and he said, I hear you cursed on air. We need to hear about, like, he was giving it to me. He was like, you're going to be sitting next to us. You're going to be famous sitting next to us. People are going to know who you are. We need to know, are there any other stories that are going to come out about you? I said, about me? I was like, no. I said, I did curse on air, but not really. I said, mother sucker, which is not even a big deal. And I'm explaining myself to him, and I'm like, God, he's mean. Is this about to be my colleague? That's just how he is. And so I get on, which I find this hilarious. He's worried about me saying something inappropriate. Like the irony in that statement.
Oh, sure.
Is the
For
irony in that.
Stephen A. Smith, yes.
Yeah, and Skip. The irony in that statement. They were worried about me maybe cursing on air, which is a perfect way to describe the world that I have lived in all my life as a Black woman covering sports. The double standard is asinine. Like, you're worried about whether or not I curse on air and I might say something inappropriate. You're like, what world am I in?
This double standard that we're held to, these ridiculous tests that we're made to take,
What?
We have to be perfect so you can be unhinged?
Yeah,
cool.
so
you're stressed about me?
Yeah, you're worried about whether or not I said, and then by the way, just so we're clear, there's never been any audio, video anywhere of me looking in the camera and just cussing people out.
Yes.
Like, there's just no such thing that exists because it didn't happen.
Yes.
And so I just thought it was really hilarious. Then I was scared as all get out,
Sure.
but now it's funny.
It's really telling. I interviewed at a company that has a reputation for being very hard on its workers, and the interview process was very much like this, where they're challenging every answer that you give because they're testing you too.
Yeah, sure.
So part of it is their test of do you have what it takes? Can you handle
100%. 100%.
It's so much pressure, though, when you're young in your career and you're already operating from a disadvantaged place. You
had no idea. I had no idea. And I was just like, oh, no. But to your point, I was built for it. It was hard, but I was built for it.
Totally built for it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'd love to hear about what stepping into a role at ESPN felt like. Like, I imagine that just feels...
I didn't know. Most career opportunities that I have had, including even working at CNN, I don't really understand the magnitude of it. I'm just like, let's try it. You know why? Because if I overthink it, I won't be able to be me. Now, it's not true. It's true that I get nervous. I was so nervous because I knew very little about other sports. I was very much the basketball gal. Mm-hmm. That's where I would shine. I was the tennis gal. I would shine there. But they were very heavy on football. I had to learn all the reporters' names. One of my oh no moments is saying a reporter's name wrong on air, live, next to them. And I wasn't working with people who pretended that I said it correctly. I was working with two men who would tell me on live television I said it wrong. Mm-hmm. So I'd be like, Ray Samini, yeah, you said that wrong last week, but continue. Back to you. You know what I mean? It's like I would make so many mistakes, and sitting in that middle seat, my co-host would not remind me. They would remind me all the time that I made a mistake, and I was like, thank you. I need that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
There's something about it that's like good old boys club, and there's something about it that feels like you've also made it when you can be given the shit and take the shit and also dish it back out. There's
100%.
Something in there
100%.
that I think women have to figure out how to navigate, especially in the world of sports, and it translates into business as well.
Yep.
Where it's like if they're comfortable with you being in the room and you need to figure out how to navigate these rooms because we operate within a patriarchy. Yeah. That's where you find your advantage. Yeah. And that's where you learn the salary everyone's making, who's on the right track, what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's fair, but it's
what it is.
I
learned. I was working there. You speaking about salary. One day, and this was not my salary while working there. But I had been there maybe 6 months, and we would get paid every 2 weeks. And one direct deposit one day was like $76,000, and I was like, wonder whose paycheck this is, because it's definitely not mine.
They messed it up.
And I was like, I am woefully underpaid.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where I'm working for free, it feels like.
Yeah.
And I was like, welcome to the bigs.
Well, you've been outspoken about being one of, if not the only person who looks like you being in these environments, who represents all the things that you represent. So I'm curious to hear about how you navigated that and what challenges, were presented as a result of that. And then this epiphany that you're being paid less. How did you advocate for yourself? And
if I'm completely honest, my first year or so, I was really it got to me mentally. It took its toll. I was told in so many ways, just be happy you're here, and a part of me felt that way too, because I get to ESPN and I was hired kind of through the back door. I didn't have to go through a real process. I just was, because this happens. That person will do it. She's chosen. And I remember a woman by the name of Jemele Hill had sent me an email, and she goes, I want to sit and talk with you about your position. This was before I actually had the position, because she was up for the position as well. And I ended up getting it. And she wanted to just, as a sister in the struggle, she wanted to give me the lowdown. And
was she there at the time? Because
yes,
she was at ESPN too.
Okay. She was a contributor. She wanted a full-time job. She hadn't gotten one yet, and they had put her up for this job because she had been on the show so often with the guys. But as she had explained to me when she was up for the job, they said, this isn't for you. This is more of an entry-level position. You are an analyst. You have more to offer. This is just really someone teeing up topics and letting the guys go back and forth. And that's fine. I didn't mind. But she also she told me the truth about, salary, what I was making, what the environment was. And it was too much for me to receive. But in all of her wisdom, she decided to be my advocate. She was my voice for me, maybe the first year and a half, 2 years that I was there, because I just didn't have a voice. I just didn't know where I could go or what I could say. And most of my frustrations were visible on television, and I would just kind of pout and be mad, not on TV per se, but I just would pout and be mad behind the scenes. And I didn't feel like I could go to a boss and say, hey, can I get help? Because I couldn't. It's just the way the world works. And that's something women need to understand. That was what I call my Ricky hazing season. And I'm okay with all of that now, because it built me into someone so much better and stronger. But at the time, I just didn't understand it. But thank God she started to advocate for me, and I would watch her advocate for me, and I learned how to advocate for myself. Yeah. It's one of these things where when you get to these places that seem foreign, my best advice would be look for someone who really cares for you. And the advocate doesn't have to be another Black woman. It could be anyone, but someone who is in a room that has the respect and the attention of those who make decisions should always be your advocate.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that you stepped into one of the, if not the toughest environment, like one of the toughest environments. Sure. It is, ESPN to this day is predominantly male.
It's a tough gig.
But I think that perspective of like, it was good for me and it helped me learn and grow is really healthy. I also think that the insight that like finding the person that is an advocate and can be an ally, it can be a white man.
It can be a white man.
And those people exist. They don't have the same lived experience as you.
Sure.
And like the onus of fighting for, the marginalized party always falls on the shoulders of that, the burden is on the shoulders of that person. But it's like, it's finding a level of trust with someone where you can bring them into your journey and sort of, I think, educate them, but also have them as an ally.
I always say that I look for allies, all different races, backgrounds all the time. It's important, though, to our earlier conversation, it's those who can, for me, everyone has someone different, but those who don't small talk, those who can get to the core of the matter.
Yes.
That's always going to be my person that's going to advocate for me because you'll understand me then. They'll understand me in a way I don't understand myself.
To be honest, I think part of the reason that we're probably like that is because we don't have the luxury to small talk either. Like we have to be all business. We can't bring in emotion as much as that's possible. Like we have to stick to the script, etc. I'll just say too, I miss Jemele on air. I don't see her as much in my life as I'd like to. She's incredible.
Yeah, same. We're hoping we put her in a space where we need more of her on television.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
To get into the ether and change the world. We need her.
Agree. And so to that end, I do want to talk briefly about the show that you guys started on Vice in 2020 called Cari and Jemele Stick to Sports. Mm-hmm. But it provides holistic context to the world in which sports and sports stars exist. Yeah. So can you share more about that show and why it was so significant?
Jemele left ESPN in 2018. I left in 2020. And I remember not necessarily knowing what that role would be for me, but we got a call one day and someone said, hey, we want to give you all a show. What do you all want to call it? And Jemele and I thought about it because oftentimes back when people used Twitter just to talk about, all things, and it was a different environment, we would get the pushback of just stick to sports. Whenever we said anything, like it was really, really popular when Colin Kaepernick was at his height of his fight. And we would tweet about Colin Kaepernick or talk about Colin Kaepernick, and every time we did, someone would reply in droves, men especially, stick to sports or get back in the kitchen. We couldn't call the show Get Back in the Kitchen, though, but it would be one of those two comments. And so that's what we came up with, stick to sports, because for so long, society has told us that they don't intersect, but they do. Politics and sports intersect every single day, as we just saw in the Super Bowl. Jemele and I would take on topics and we would give our opinions. I would say her political acumen is a little more so than mine, because being a local, she was a writer for very many papers. She had her own column, and those were topics that she was very passionate about. Topics I was passionate about were about just the culture, more so about what it looked like and how we were projecting and how we were being protected in sports. And so that show for us was the very first time two women of color had a late night talk show. And we did it during COVID. It was a time where we really could say anything. And we had a great time, and it was wonderful. It really changed my perspective, because I realized more than ever that is what this world is going to be about. I just can't live in the world of sports. I have to be beyond.
Why do you think people struggle to understand the connection between politics and sports, though? Is that intentional ignorance?
100%. Yeah. Because sports is supposed to be an escape in theory, but there are so many symbolisms of politics and sports. And I think more than ever in today's society, the president went to the Super Bowl. The halftime show was a political message more than we've ever seen before. I think the commercials are political, whether we realize them or not, advocating for one policy or another. Not necessarily I'm running for office, but there are policies in these commercials that we're watching, these Super Bowl commercials. And people choose to ignore it because they want it to be that last, their sanctuary, if you will. And it can be. It can be, but you can't deny that they don't intersect. You cannot pay attention to it, but they do intersect.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. We haven't talked enough about women's sports, to be honest. I mean, women's sports are everything yeah. And I'm loving it, and I'm loving your voice in that. Yeah. Last year, you did an incredible segment on CNN breaking down the optics of the Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese so-called rivalry. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, I think everyone knows this, but they're two phenomenal young players in the NBA. Yeah. They've also just brought so much attention to the WNBA and money to players in a way that we've never seen before. Yeah. Why is this story so important for you to cover? And what other stories are happening in sports media that are exciting or challenging or vital to cover right now?
That story for me was, again, the perfect intersection of sports culture and politics.
Totally.
And so, again, those stories, when they slap me in the face, I eat, breathe, and sleep those stories. Caitlin Clark has become such a superstar in terms of how good she is on the court, because when I tell you she's undeniable. While watching her in college when she was at Iowa, they compared her to Steph Curry. They talked about her ability to shoot the three-pointer, and that is why, on its face value, just talking about sports, why she became so popular, because I want to see someone shoot from the logo. Same with Steph Curry. Steph Curry had the most impact on the game. I wouldn't call him the GOAT over LeBron, but he had the most impact because he made little boys at home who were seemingly short, and he's not short. But if you're 5'10" or 5'11" and you see Steph Curry, you're like, I can do that. Because everybody can't dunk.
For the record, Steph Curry's like 6'2".
Correct. But he looks tiny, right? He looks like
he does look tiny. And then you meet him and you're like, you're not tiny, but compared to those guys, yes.
Compared to those guys, he's 6'2" is like, with my heels on, I'm 6'1". Like 6'2" seems feasible, right?
Totally.
Right? It seems achievable.
Tatum's like 6'8", maybe.
Correct.
6'7", 6'8".
He's not 6'6". He's not built like a machine that you've never seen before. He's aspirational, and shooting from the logo is aspirational. He plays every man's basketball, and she plays every woman's basketball, and that's why people were fascinated, because you can, I can see me. And she had such a huge impact, but there were so many other women before her who did as well in the WNBA. And the reason in our America is that she seemed very mainstream and she represented the majority and people were interested. Finally, someone they could look at and relate to, the same way that I related to Oprah. The majority of white Americans could look at her and say, I'm interested in this. The WNBA was predominantly, still is, predominantly a black league of women who were LGBTQ, right, IA, people from other countries. All of these things are hard to have brand appeal in our America. And that's just the truth. And so people were very upset that Caitlin was getting all of this attention. And I was like, she deserves it because, one, she is fascinating to watch. But I understand. You're saying the league has been here for 27 years and we're acting as if it just started. So that story to me was amazing because she met her. Everybody needs a rival. They need someone who is the, Superman needs his evil nemesis, if you will. And I'm not saying Angel Reese is an evil nemesis, but that game where Angel Reese came and played and trash talked and did her thing, the one thing that was interesting about Angel Reese that I absolutely love more than anything was that during that game when it was the finals, Iowa was supposed to win. She's taking on Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark was going to get her coronation. She was going to be the best thing in college basketball since sliced bread. And LSU beat them. And not only did they beat them soundly. And then not only after they won, Angel Reese did what every red-blooded American would do who plays sports. She was allowed to talk trash. And watching the optics of a big, tall black woman talk trash to a smaller white woman on television sent the world in a frenzy. And I was like, welcome to America. This is the world we live in.
And you hear all these men that have never talked about women's sports, never paid attention to women's sports.
Have takes.
Correct.
Have something to say.
Correct.
Grown men were calling her names that are vile and disgusting. And I'm like, but where is all this vitriol and hatred coming from? Because she trash talked us. And by the way, Caitlin completely oblivious to it, or whether she was or not, she had been trash talking throughout the entire tournament. No one had a problem with that. So then because Angel won at the highest level, college basketball level, it's a problem. And I was like, wow, we're saying the quiet part out loud now.
This actually, though, encapsulates to me why you are so important, why what you represent, what you do, and your voice are so important, because you brought a perspective that was not being shared and expertise and experience that didn't exist to the conversation. And that's why I think what you said it was CNN, right? Broke through. So I think that's where...
That's powerful.
At a time where we're talking about DEI hires, quote unquote, it is proven time and time again that the more diversity that we have at a table, the more representation, the results are better and improved.
Time and time again. You say it's us.
Yeah.
It's time and time again.
It's just a no-brainer to me.
It's no-brainer.
This is so unrelated. Did you grow up watching the WNBA, like Cheryl Swoops and Rebecca Lobo, Lisa Leslie, all this?
No, I'll be honest. When they started the WNBA, I was excited, just like most fans were, and that was what my research taught me. The first 2 years was very popular. The money wasn't there in terms of they weren't getting the response from the fan base, but it was very popular. People were excited for it because it took so long to come. They got, they finally would get to see some of the stars play. Lisa Leslie, Dawn Staley, Maya Moore,
all of them. I loved it.
And so I didn't watch it until probably, if I was honest, probably about 5 or 6 years in, when I moved to a certain neighborhood, and I was like, and there were a lot of women who played basketball, and so I was like, I need to start paying attention. I need to give it all of its love. And I remember I would have to fight to find it. And the advancement to me, where we know where we can find it, and we have other leagues that are popping up now, other professional leagues for women that are popping up now, tells me how far we've come. Because here's what's interesting. The NBA also had the same problem. It took them about 25, 26 years to get their footing. So if we look back, the WNBA is on par. It's a fairly new league. Is it sustainable? I think it is.
Yeah.
Because we now have our Steph Curry, and then our LeBron will come, which I could even liken to an Asia Wilson, and then our Michael Jordan will come, and we need these stars. We need Caitlin Clark. Say what you want. I will be the first to admit the league needs Caitlin Clark. And that's why it's not so much a race issue for me. It's just a fair issue. It's an equity issue. She has pointed it out. And it's like, let's give some respect to the women who inspired her to do what she's doing now and not act as if women's basketball didn't exist before she started to play. I feel as if it's sustainable now, and we're going to see so much more. And I'm happy she's in the league, quite frankly.
I agree completely, and I think you're right. She's the first to point out some of these things.
Yeah.
And she's obsessed with Maya Moore, for example. That is the woman that inspired her. We also have a pipeline of really exciting talent. Paige Buckers, Juju Watkins, like charisma and great.
Kiki. We have UCLA play. UCLA is number one. It's really interesting. I like to say this because that's my school. Number one. They're doing really well. And we have a ton of superstars coming out of there as well. Okay.
Don't want to brag. South Carolina's my school. Dawn Staley, just saying.
She shut me down, didn't she? She came in with the goat.
Okay, I'd love to close out with some advice for those that are inspired to follow in your footsteps, to model your career. in sports journalism, what would you tell them given, current climate and landscape? Because it has shifted so much.
Yeah, I think it was a little tougher to get into the business when I was in it. When I started, I think it was really difficult to bring your full self to work. I think it's a little easier to do that. But no matter what, my hope is that the next generation of journalists remain true to journalism, and it's not so much about the Instagram, social media, TikTok popularity of it all. I know that influencer is a part of our job as well, but find the stories and tell the stories that matter. Encourage your bosses to be okay with you talking about things that are uncomfortable, because if we normalize the neutral, if you will, we'll never get into the uncomfortable parts of covering sports, and we won't ever get our day as women. We won't ever get the big contracts that the Stephen A's get, or or we listen to like, Tom Brady's making like $300 million. And by the way, as an analyst, it's going to be tough to do. But what I'm saying is I want to get in that conversation, and the only way we can do it is if we break stories and make a difference and a huge impact. So stay true to that. Guard your emotions and your joy. And what I mean by that is everything isn't an emotional conversation, and know that as a woman, they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. But tell the stories. And the best thing, we mentioned a good friend of mine, Jemele Hill, earlier.
Future friend of mine.
Yeah, you guys have to be besties. She has the ability to speak truth, and you may not agree with her, but you respect her because it's backed up by documents and facts, and she never gets emotional. She keeps it right here, and she speaks to the heart of the matter. And that is an incredible skill set that I encourage a lot of women to have, because you can argue any point if you keep your emotion right where it needs to be, but have your facts behind you. And make really solid points, because you can disagree with me, but you can't disagree that wasn't an intelligent statement that I made.
Yeah, I think you both do this. You bring experience and confidence to what you're saying,
Yeah, and that's the thing. Women, sometimes it takes us so long to find our voice.
Yeah.
Start early. Yeah. Find your voice early.
Yeah, I think the recognition that it is harder for women and just acknowledging that is helpful for the next generation to hear. We're going to close out with some Would You Rathers.
Okay.
Would you rather go blank on live TV or get a case of the giggles?
I'd rather get a case of the giggles. That is me.
I'm not on TV, but same.
That is me for sure.
Would you rather go back to school to learn a new skill or teach what you know to a class of newcomers?
I'd rather go back to school and learn a new skill.
Same. Would you rather only answer emails with emojis or only answer calls on FaceTime?
Wow. All emails with emojis. Geesh, I would have to be so familiar with the emojis or answer calls on FaceTime. No way. Emails with emojis. No way.
You don't have time for that.
I don't have time for that. And no telling what I am up to.
Would you rather write a great piece of feedback or receive a great piece of feedback?
I'd rather write a great piece of feedback.
Love that. Would you rather dress up or dress down for work?
Oh, dress up, always.
We at Argent love to hear that.
Always.
Would you rather accidentally leave your mic unmuted or your camera on?
Oh gosh, both are death. Well, my camera on. I'd have to take the L that way. You cannot. Yeah, no, my camera on. That is a no-no. You're taught in the business the mic is always on, so you're supposed to be careful.
You're lucky.
Hey, we're taught in the business the mic is always on, but I'd rather leave my camera on.
Yeah, you're lucky. Would you rather attend the NBA Finals or the Super Bowl?
NBA Finals every day, all day.
When are we going to a game? I have to see Luka play.
We should go to a. When they're not coming back. They're not coming back. I think they just left here. And Luka wasn't on the team yet. Let me look up the schedule. We have to go to a game.
Would you rather interview the #1 draft pick or the retiring legend?
The retiring legend.
Mm-hmm. Hey, LeBron or Wemby?
Yeah, no questions asked. Yeah, no questions asked. The retiring legend is giving me the stories. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wemby's too politically correct for me right now.
Yeah. He needs a little edge.
Yeah, he needs some edge.
Thank you for being here. I love you.
Thank you for having me. Look, we could talk all day.
All day.
Can we do a 5-hour podcast next? 1 hour is not enough. I have so much to say.
Well, you just have a lot of stories. Your career is incredible. You're just like one of my favorite humans to be in the presence of.
Same. Feelings mutual. Feeling is mutual.
Cry laughing every time we're together.
Because we have a good time.
But I just am really appreciative of your existence.
Oh, you too. When I tell you, you represent in a way that makes me understand that we really truly have allies, and it's not just a word. You are an ally to me.
Thank you.
I love you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Work Friends, a podcast from Argent. Listen and follow on all podcast platforms and subscribe to the Argent YouTube channel for more clips and bonus content. Plus, email your work questions and dilemmas at workfriends@argentwork.com for a chance to have one of our amazing guests weigh in with advice. I'm Sally Christensen, and we'll see you next time.
Work Friends.
Work Friends is produced by Gina Marinelli with editing by Ryan Woldoff. Our theme music is by Karina De Piano and Melanie Naima. This episode was recorded at Podstream Studio in New York, New York.